Hey everyone, welcome. Thanks for joining us today. We'll get going in just a couple of minutes here. We're going to sort of hang out, let folks join, and then we'll dive into today's workshop: how to optimize onboarding with data. Got Luke and Sherelle here with me. Excited to have these guys joining me. We'll do formal intros in a second. But I'm gonna, while we're just waiting, I saw this on another workshop and I kind of wanted to do it. Little icebreaker, Sherelle. I know how much you love those. But the question that was asked, which I thought was a really good one, was if you had to listen to a movie score for, eternity, which movie would you pick to listen to? Sherelle, you got anything? Luke? No.
Oh, I was typing in the chat. Home Alone 2 all day long.
Nice. I might go with maybe like Last of the Mohicans or like Inception would be good too.
Yeah.
Far more sophisticated than Home Alone 2.
I like this icebreaker because I actually had an answer to it, which usually I feel like icebreaker questions, you're like, I don't know what to say. I need to really think about
We got Superman in the chat.
Superman,
and John Wick 1, 2, 3, and 4.
That's one way to give yourself more variety. Just list all of the movies.
Technically, Juan cheated a little bit. That's 4 movies. So we'll allow it. We're here for data. Right?
Rocky would be good too.
Yeah. I would go Guardians of the Galaxy. I think I like that soundtrack a lot.
That's good too. That is a good idea.
I used to manage this movie store back in Iowa, and every morning I would put on Rocky to play around the movie store. Try and give my customers some motivation for the day.
Were you tracking conversion on that, or how did that work out?
No, there was no way to track conversion on that, but it did occasionally get rented for sure.
That's awesome.
Oh, Anna's currently listening to the Tangled score.
Yeah, that's listening to the things the kids are listening to is definitely relate to that one.
Pulp Fiction is also really good.
Yeah. Cool. Well, let's say we kick things off here. So as everyone who's joining here, if you're looking for some ideas and sort of tactics on how to optimize onboarding with data, you're in the right place. That's what we're going to be digging into over the next 30 to 45 minutes. We're going to try to keep this one super tactical and make sure that we have plenty of time for questions at the end as well. So I'm going to do really quick intros. I'm Stuart Bolcom. I run growth at Arrows. Have Sherelle Narriman here, who is head of customer success at Arrows, and I'm going to let Luke McClellan do his own intro, but he is our special guest today. He runs onboarding at Blaze. Luke, give us the 30-second. What is Blaze? What do you do? And why are you excited to be here?
Yeah, right on. Hey, thanks for the invite. Thanks for having me, guys. Glad to be here. Onboarding at Blaze, right? So we are a point of sale system in the cannabis industry. So we onboard customers who are opening dispensaries or who are existing operators in the cannabis space all over the United States onto our platform. I run a data migration team, the onboarding team, and yeah, we picked up Arrows to help optimize our onboarding experience for our customer and keep them on track. So glad to be here. Thanks for having me, guys.
Love it. Yeah, we're going to get into some sort of specific tactics, specific things that you've been able to do and look at in a little bit. But let's talk about what onboarding, why we're all here, and why we think this topic in particular is so important. Sherelle, I know you always say onboarding never ends, but the thing that you always have to be doing is, or the thing you should not be doing is setting and forgetting your process once you've set it in place. And today we're going to talk about how you can use data and the data that you have from your customers in that onboarding process to more confidently optimize and improve the way that you're delivering that program, the way that you're enabling customers to get to the outcomes that they want. So to do that, we're going to go through a few things here. Why you need data, what are the types of data, the fundamentals of capturing the data that you're going to need to optimize your program. And then probably the most important thing here, and we have another slide a little later that really gets into this, but ultimately the data itself is not that useful unless you do anything with it that is going to improve process. So we're going to talk about some specific tactics there. And then, as I mentioned, we're going to get into a little bit of a case study of sort of how Luke and Blaze are using the insights they're getting from arrows to really drive that optimization process. And then we're going to do a really quick demo of arrows, 30 seconds, a minute, just sort of give you a sense of how that actually works. But then we'll get into questions. We'll make sure that we have plenty of time for that as well. So if you have questions, make sure you're dropping them in the chat throughout the session, and we'll pick as many as we can and answer them live at the end. So the first question that I want to sort of pose before we get into that sort of first topic, this will be in the chat. You can engage with this poll there. But are you confident that you know where customers are getting stuck today? How good do you feel about your ability to identify the roadblocks, the things that you need to be working on in order to make meaningful progress and have an impact on your program as a whole? So we'll see how the votes fall there. I'm going to let Sherelle get into our first topic as folks are answering the poll, and that's sort of going to relate to the poll as well. But what data do you need to actually start optimizing? Sherelle, I know you have a few different things to go through here. So, like, I guess first off, why is data so important in your view at all? And then sort of what is the data that you're looking at when it comes to optimizing a program?
Yeah, I think especially in the space of onboarding, historically we've done a lot of, I feel like these customers are doing well, or I feel like this onboarding is going the way we thought it should. Or because programs are still so immature in the sense of their age and how long they've been around, you often don't have real metrics defined or goals defined, so that it's hard to benchmark or measure against them, right? And so what that means is it's really, when I say big things like onboarding never ends and you should always be optimizing your program, those are big things. Like, that's not a light task to go do. You could potentially sit and spend weeks and months and years building these programs. So having the data helps you at least prioritize where to start in that world where we believe that you should always be optimizing and always be thinking about this. And I say this to our own customers, and Luke's probably tired of me saying this to him, but it's not about sitting down and spending a month at a time fixing your process or your steps or your templates. It's actually identifying where those little breaks happen over time and fixing those bits, because that compounding effect is how you'll actually optimize it over time. And so the biggest, and part of why you probably use this poll as the first question, the easiest quote unquote place to start is where customers are actually stuck. So if you have a sense of you have 20 steps in your process and 10 customers are stuck on the same step, that's probably a bad step. That doesn't mean it's the wrong step or a customer shouldn't do it. It could just mean that it's presented at the wrong time in their journey. It could mean that the instructions aren't clear. It could mean that that thing isn't actually aligned to your customers' goals and outcomes that they were hoping for. And what that looks like on paper is we end up just feature dumping on people or adding steps to make it selfishly more convenient for customers to get through things. And we'll share an example at the end too, where I'm very guilty of this myself. I also have goals at Arrows and want customers to do specific things, right? But asking them to do it at the wrong time is actually doing more damage than good. And I was able to use our own insights and data to actually capture some of that and see where customers are stuck. So the short answer is it lets you stop guessing and thinking and hypothesizing where people are and actually have a sense of, this is where they're stuck. Let me fix this bit. Did this fix it? Yes or no? If yes, great. Let's find the next place to optimize. If no, stick here and keep optimizing that.
Yeah, totally. And you mentioned one of the challenges that folks have when they're building the program is not having that baseline, not having that sort of starting point on what does the data look like today? What does it look like to see if we're improving or what's actually happening as we make changes? How do you think about that? And Luke, I'd love to hear your perspective here too on when you're looking at your program as a whole and the performance of that program over time. Like, what is that sort of baseline number that you're looking at? How are you thinking about breaking up, we did this, or it was this at this point in time, we did this, and now we've seen this improvement, or we haven't seen the improvement that we're expecting? How do you sort of think about that part of the data?
Right on. Yeah, absolutely. Definitely something that we take a look at as we make revisions to our plan, right? It's something it's always a work in progress, right? We put phases together and tasks together, and then we look at the data and how long it took somebody to get through that, right? So we're always refining the process. It's not a one size fits all. So constantly just looking at the plan and saying, okay, we want our customers to move through this phase within 2 or 3 days, right? There's a good chunk of tasks in there. We think 2 days, we want to keep the momentum going, right? And so we can pop in and we can say, oh, hey, wow, it took them 14 days to get through this first phase of tasks. Like, let's look at that and hone in and see if we can break that up. If we add another phase, that's okay. If we need to restructure it a little bit to, so it's not, maybe 10 tasks, maybe it's 2 phases of 5 tasks, so it's a little bit easier to digest and a little bit quicker for them to move forward, because sometimes they open up the plan and they're like, oh, wow, that's a lot of stuff. And, immediately like analysis paralysis sets in and they just, like, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do, so making it smaller and digestible chunks does help them move through the plan a little bit quicker, and having this data to make those decisions and this actionable data to make those decisions is a huge help for us. Absolutely.
Sure. How do you think about that specifically when you're thinking about sort of phases or stages in the customer journey, that, not every stage of or set of tasks is created equal, right? Some things are going to take longer than others. Some things are maybe, fill in this form, click this, make this selection, whereas others maybe involve more people, expected to be longer time frames. How do you think about that when you see this type of data? How do you sort of set expectations around, actually, this is okay that this thing is taking this long versus there's an opportunity for improvement here?
Right. Part of it, I think there's 2 things. One is having some degree of defined goals or hopes or outcomes that you're after. So if your goal is actually to speed up onboarding time, let's say it's taking your customers on average 60 days and you want that to be 45 days, then finding these outliers where things take long. And the second piece is, where do you actually have control to fix things, right? So in this example, this is an example from an Arrows Insights report for a template. A template is just a step of processes you're putting in front of a customer. And in here, let's say this was my reporting and I know my process well, and I actually know reporting integration takes a long time. It revolves around having other teams involved. It revolves around having IT involved. There's technical stuff that needs to go on. I don't have control over that. So if I'm trying to reduce my time, I'm going to start looking in other buckets. So just because that one, for example, says it's taking 19 days doesn't mean that's the first place you should dive into if you don't have a sense of like, what are those controls and what are those goals, right? Whereas in my case, I know I have room in the let's make it official phase, because it's things like pay for your account, order specific swag, set up some questions and answers. There is room for me to actually have control and potentially make things move a little bit faster. And so when you look at it actually broken out and look at the data, instead of taking a step back and the holistic view of, oh crap, how do I speed this thing up? Now I can at least open up that first step of let's make it official and see what I'm asking customers to do in that, and where do I actually have control to improve it. And then if you do that enough times, you can actually slow down where customers are getting stuck, and in turn speed up that bigger process towards their aligned goals. And then if you go down to the individual task level, like you're showing here, we're using a lot of jargon, but ultimately phases and tasks and arrows are just steps and then categories of steps, right? In that let's make it official phase, you can now open it up, or in this example, look at the reporting integration piece, for example. That is still a win if you're also looking at time over time. So what we're showing you is in Q3, it was taking an average of 19 days for your customers who had a plan to complete that part of the journey. Whereas in Q2, it was actually taking 47 days. So on paper, that could be a win because you shorten the time in there. The kind of third and lagging component is, our customer, just because it's reducing time, are you still getting customers to their desired outcomes and their desired needs? And obviously that's where activation and adoption and all that stuff still matters. So it's not as simple as just going in here and splicing and dicing tasks up and deleting stuff, because sure, you can shorten time that way. But part of it is understanding which tasks are actually driving customers to their goals, and then making sure those are properly labeled and described and have every bit that you need for the customer to go do that, and tackling those pieces where you know you have room for some improvement.
Yeah, for sure. Luke, I'm curious at Blaze and in your process, like how do you, when you look at this sort of data, you're sort of, and we're going to get into the tactical improvements you can go and make based on some of this data. But when you see this data at a sort of high level and you see this sort of relative improvement, period over period, quarter over quarter, how do you think about communicating that out? Like, what does that sort of narrative look like from the data to, the rest of the team, the sort of executive leadership of the company? Like, how do you start being able to use this data to communicate the progress that is being made during this phase of the life cycle?
Yeah, right on. So, we have a goal of 18 days, right, to get a customer from kickoff call to launch, right? And so that's our main KPI driving onboarding. And being able to take a look at this and show like, hey, when we first signed up for this product in July, I think it was, and looking at the month by month and even quarter by quarter and seeing a consistent drop in the average days that the plans are active is huge for me and my team, and also for executive leadership, because they're like, hey, like this is working, right? We finally found a tool that is working to help get our customers through onboarding quickly, because our sales team is always closing deals, right? And so our pipeline is always full. So we want to get them through so we can have time for the new customers coming in. And so being able to say, hey, check this out, Q3, we're at this mark, and right now Q4, we're pacing this, and so that's great to encouragement and motivation for the team to keep going and to keep making these improvements where we can see improvements to be made.
Yeah, totally. And like I said, we're gonna get into the what do you do with this data from a sort of tactical perspective and sort of the opposite direction to reporting out to leadership. But before we get there, we have another poll for you, and this is obviously a sort of prerequisite to being able to see all these insights, is capturing the data that you need to identify where customers are stuck, be able to slice and dice, as Sherelle mentioned, to get to the changes that you're actually going to make. So as we get into sort of a walkthrough of what you can go do with the data, I'm really curious to see how folks are keeping track of things on the data side. But Sherelle, kicking it over to you. This I mentioned this right at the top, that the data is great. Everybody at times likes to look at a pretty dashboard, but ultimately the data is as valuable as what you do with it. And I know you have some real examples here of changes that you've made in your process at Arrows and in onboarding customers through a plan. Maybe we can sort of get into that and some of the tactical things that you've been able to do.
Yeah, part of it is also just like validating some of those hypotheses we all have, or those gut feelings about this feels wrong, this feels too big, or we have the most common reason customers end up getting stuck is most of us have internal bias around our own process and our own systems, and we're in our products or services daily. So we think something is super easy and it actually might not land that way to customers. So having that data can help you at least validate, yeah, I had a funny feeling about this task feeling wrong, and now there's X number of people stuck on it. Let me go look at it. What you're showing here is actually an onboarding plan that we use inside of Arrows for one segment of our customers. And I have multiple templates going at all times, and I'm optimizing them as I go. So part of using the data is also understanding when to launch the new process so that you can then kind of benchmark month over month, quarter over quarter, whatever time frame you're looking at. So on the left was one of my templates I was using earlier in the year. And actually it highlights some of that selfish bias, because with Arrows, part of our goal is for you to start sending customer-facing onboarding plans, which then unlocks all of the data and the CRM integration and all the visibility and reporting everyone wants more of in their onboarding world. And selfishly for us, that is also part of our model. We want you to use more plans and want you to adopt it further, and that makes it stickier over time, right? So there's a task jammed into that Arrows template phase there called prepare to send your first plan. And I quickly noticed it was upwards of like 80% of customers were not doing anything with that task. So what that meant was they were going on, they were scheduling review calls, they were getting into that HubSpot configuration section, and they were doing things in their plans. They just weren't hitting send on that first customer plan. And I quickly realized a couple of things. One, it's a selfish goal. I want you to do it sooner than later, but most people feel a little bit more confident if they understand how the data works and how Arrows integrates with HubSpot and all that. And then two, I think it was poorly named. And so if you look at the right side, what I ended up realizing was talking to some of those customers, they actually were sending plans. They just wanted to have a little bit more time to do a review and set up their HubSpot pieces. So we realized it's probably the last step in onboarding. And keep in mind, onboarding never ends, right? But you have to have some sort of finish line or some sort of goal for customers to achieve, and it has to be their goal too. And in our case, their goals for customers is often to improve the customer experience and get visibility into your reporting data. Sending plans is the thing that unlocks that. So what I realized too was I had actually jammed multiple steps into that prepare to send your first plan. And I named it very subjectively, because prepare could mean a week to Luke, and it could mean a month to Stuart, and it could mean a year to Sherelle. And what we actually noticed in the data was exactly that. There was no pattern, there was no rhyme or reason. Some customers were on that task for a day, some customers were on it for a month at a time, because technically it is listed in a way that was telling them to do that. And we actually realized it's two steps. It's creating your first plan and then actually sending it. Those are different actions with different steps in them and different instructions. And it should be the last thing you do, because now you can say, I achieved my goals with this thing. Let me keep going and activate it further. And if you go to the next slide, I think we break down some of the actual descriptions inside of these tasks. And this, you can see the evolution over time a little bit more. So that prepare to send your first plan is just a really bad task. The instructions in it, and I can say that because it's my task and I put it in front of people, so I will admit some guilt there. But it wasn't really preparing you to send your first plan. It was just telling you to find a customer and then build some sort of invitation email, but it wasn't actually catering towards sending that first plan. The second version was a little bit better, but there's actually 3 call to actions in that middle task there, and none of them are sending your first plan. One of them was about how the CRM card works inside of Arrows or inside of HubSpot. One of it was a link to email templates that you could use to introduce onboarding plans. And then the video attached there was actually a video showing you how to add participants inside of a plan once you create it. But none of that actually matches the title of the task, which is to send that first plan. So the third iteration that we have found actually works and people understand is a very concise and actionable task. The instructions, we like to say the who, what, when, where, why should all be encompassed in a task. This is very clear. You, the point person, need to send this task. Here is where you go do that or send this plan. Here is where in the plan you can go do that. If you want more instructions, you can click the link and read it. And then the button on the actual task takes you to the plans page inside of your Arrows account where you can see the plan and go into the share panel. So pretty quick evolution too. This happened over a few months' time. We didn't spend years trying to come up with this. And the reason that was possible was identifying one single place where customers were stuck the most and then fixing that bit and then obviously working with that over time.
Yeah, one thing that I want to call out here and sort of the difference between these 2 slides we just showed is the difference between when you're making improvements by restructuring your plan, so either reordering tasks, adding additional tasks, as Luke mentioned earlier, to break up things into different phases. There's all sorts of things, and often the biggest early wins are going to be in restructuring, things that were previously getting lost at the end of a plan or at the end of a process, and then causing a big blocker later, and getting ahead of those dependencies. But then the other type of optimization being, as is sort of in this example, the very sort of task specific inside of a task type of optimization. Luke, I'm going to hand it over to you in just a second for the sort of how it happened at Blaze, how the specific changes that you were able to make. But I want to show some data really quickly, because this is something that anybody can go do, whether you're using Arrows or not. And this is based on Arrows data across thousands and thousands of tasks, thousands of plans. That the things that really impact whether people take action and make progress in a plan really come down to these 4 sort of attributes which you can add to plans. And the ones that obviously stand out the most here are, does your task have a due date, and is it assigned to somebody? Does it have a clear action, and does it have a clear and sort of appropriate description that answers what and why are important as well? But there's some really big opportunities for improvement here, and we've sort of see this in the data. So if you have a plan, whether you're using arrows, whether you're using a spreadsheet, whether you're using email templates, whatever it might be, looking through your process and finding places where you can add these attributes in more tasks you're assigning to customers or giving to customers to complete, the greater the engagement that you should expect to see. And with that, I'll pass it over to Luke. There's a quote up here from I think one of the first times that you were working with Sherelle on using insights to improve your plan. But I'm curious to hear, sort of from your perspective, how having data has shifted the way that you think about improvement and the sort of continuous iteration on your process.
Yeah, absolutely. So this quote is particular to our third iteration of basically the master onboarding template that we've created. We started with 3 different templates, and each one would be assigned to a different onboarding package that the customer signed up for through the sales cycle, right? So they would come into Blaze and they would get assigned a onboarding template related to the onboarding package that they signed up for. Through the dynamic branching, we found that we could combine all of the phases into one master plan. And then based on the HubSpot properties, the different phases in that plan would show to the customer as they're going through. So we could kind of tailor the plan to them using the dynamic branching functionality within the arrows point. So that was huge. So now we have one template, and some of the tasks, so we kind of front loaded our plan a little bit that was heavy in the tasks in the first phase, and that was preventing our customers from getting to the kickoff call. So we have this before we begin, we want you to do 20 things, right? And that was just way too much right from the get for our customers, to huge hurdle to get over, right? Big hill to climb to get to the kickoff call, and so then with this data, we were seeing that customers were taking, a longer time to get through this phase, to get to the kickoff call. So we moved the kickoff call to the first phase, right? Because we want to continue this momentum that is built up through the sales cycle. They get all pumped up, they come into our pipeline, and we don't want them to have to go through all these tasks to get to the kickoff call, right? And so, okay, cool, let's put the kickoff call first, right? And so then if that is, if that phase is taking them longer to complete still, then it's something with our handoff from sales, right? So then becomes a meeting with the sales team to say, hey, we're finding that customers are still taking 5 to 7 days to book a kickoff call with us, right? So we're giving them the plan in the first email that they get. So why, so what's taking them so long? So maybe we can work on our handoff with the sales team so that the onboarding rep is introduced maybe in the last call of the sales process. They get a little bit FaceTime, explain onboarding, and then they get the email and they already know what the setup is. So they click to begin onboarding, and then they click that kickoff call, and we can go right into why they chose Blaze, what their goals are, so we can identify those aha moments, and we can drive a clear path to those aha moments once we understand what their goals are. And we can and then we can look at the plan and say, okay, well, their goal is product and inventory management. Okay, well, let's move that phase up, right? So let's get to that part of onboarding faster so that they can, so that light bulb goes off and they're like, oh, this is why I signed up for Blaze, right? So we can kind of tailor the plan even more and adjust and move tasks or move phases or tasks up into different areas of the plan so that they can get there faster. Also, we identified some other phases that were very technical, right? So setting up e-commerce and developer accounts and things like that, very technical tasks that were kind of right there in the beginning, right? And so a lot of times, our customers are going to have a web developer, an IT guy that's going to be responsible for this. So a totally different person. And so, identifying that person on the kickoff call and then assigning those tasks to them, and then moving those phases further down into the plan allows the customer to come right into the kickoff call. We explain the plan to them and they can get started. and start completing tasks rather than getting bogged down with this technical setup of creating developer accounts and e-commerce things, because they're probably not going to have a lot to do with that anyways, since that's going to be the IT or their web developer person. So just being able to kind of see a path and being able to clear that path so that our customers can easily follow that has been a huge help.
Yeah, totally. I'm curious, Sherelle, when you were working with, you work with all our customers on these types of questions, these types of, how do I go apply, or how could I apply some of the data that I'm seeing? What were things that stood out about, or what are sort of some of the commonalities between, the Blaze plan or Blaze template and others, or things that are sort of stood out as specific? Like what are things that are common things that others probably will be seeing in their own plans that you sort of call out as go check for this type of thing to make an improvement?
Yeah. Part of it too was just like talking with Luke so often and seeing his positive reaction to the changes and that being motivating, because it was obviously he's improving his customer experience, but also improving a lot of their internal processes and experiences, and things that used to be frustrating for him or annoyingly manual then get automated because he's focusing on those little tidbits that were annoying and then fixing them, right? That's I think one of the most commonalities I see across that is I get asked the question often. I think Luke and I chatted about this early on too, of is there such a thing as too many tasks or too many steps? Am I putting too much in front of customers? Yes, probably. But if they're the right steps and they're the things that drive me towards my goals, then I don't care as much being the recipient of that, right? It's when tasks feel like they're the wrong ones or out of order or confusing that I then start to look at the bigger picture and think, oh, this is actually overwhelming, because are the next 50 tasks going to look and feel like this? And what I love about Luke's approach was he actually took it like one task at a time, because they have a big implementation process, and it is complex, and there's technical integrations that have to happen. And there's a lot of e-commerce involved in setting up those types of POS systems. And so Luke did have a big template, multiple templates, like you mentioned, with a lot of steps. And that's what I see pretty commonly across everyone, which isn't a bad thing at all. But what Luke did was try to find where are the gaps and where are things breaking and where are customers actually getting stuck in that process, and zooming out and asking himself, is there an opportunity to consolidate some of that using more of the advanced features that Arrows and HubSpot had to offer him? So seeing him both continue to do the job and move quickly was really energizing and refreshing, because if you just, again, you can't sit and spend all that time fixing a process without testing it. So him having the ability to go in real time, look at the insights, template data, make one change, come back a week later and notice an improvement. And improvement doesn't also mean like it happened faster. It could mean that it's actually going slower because you added more explanation type tasks and customers are actually achieving their goals. It's just taking them a day or two longer. That could still be a very big win. So I think the most common thing I see is people having an overwhelming amount of tasks, and not in the sense of just a number, but in the sense of I don't know which ones are working or aren't working, or are driving action or aren't driving action, and then quickly identifying ones where you have control to change things. And I think that's what was refreshing about watching Luke do it. And then we have like a monthly check-in call, and he would come to the next call, the next call, the next call. And every month he had optimized one more thing or changed one more thing. And when you zoomed out far enough, he, I assume, is pretty excited and happy with his onboarding results, which is why he's likely here and sharing, right? But over time, he's been able to actually improve the process for customers. He's been able to make it a better experience to share feedback between his marketing and his sales teams, because now he can actually point to that data. He has been a huge champion and is pushing Arrows, the product, internally for his company. And that's not just a plug for Arrows, but more of the value that that type of model is bringing to their team and to their business, of being able to identify actually where are our customers, because we spent so much time wooing them in marketing and in sales, and now they get kind of thrown over the line to CS or onboarding. And Luke has essentially built an entire world around that too now, where he can see in HubSpot exactly where customers are. He can see which tasks customers are getting stuck on. There are tasks that we've talked about where he thinks they might need optimization, but not right now. biggest problems, right? So also leveraging his human time to be more strategic versus just focusing and reacting constantly.
Yeah, totally. Okay, so we're going to switch to questions in just a second. I want to take 60 seconds, talk really quickly about Arrows, the product, and how you end up with all this data and insights that you can use to iterate and improve your process. So really sort of high level, Arrows is a collaborative onboarding tool that connects really deeply to HubSpot. And what that looks like, if I share Arrows itself, is a customer-facing onboarding plan that you can, I'm logged in here, but you can share this with a customer. They don't need to create an Arrows account. The idea is it's an extension of your brand, of your experience with that customer. You can assign them tasks. They can come in really quickly, see what is the thing that I need to go work on right now to make progress towards our aligned goals that we've identified. You can have all sorts of actions that are very specific and sort of in line here. So things like e-signatures, meeting bookings, file requests, forms, all sorts of actions that you need your customers to take. And the thing that really sets Arrows apart from a spreadsheet or a project management tool or endless email threads is that you can capture that data in a way that is focused on what the customer needs to do, but then also connect that experience, that data to a record in HubSpot. We sync 35 plus data points back to HubSpot. And then inside of HubSpot, you can access all of that information as properties. As an internal manager of onboarding, you can get directly to the plan and take action, making changes that you need from inside of HubSpot. So you're not sort of adopting another inbox, another tool for your team, but you get all of that data back inside of your HubSpot account. So I'm going to leave that there. If you are interested in learning more about Arrows, the tool, drop us a message in the chat. We'll have a poll at the very end as well, or head over to arrows.to/demo, and we'll be more than happy to chat, give you sort of a live, specific to you and your use case walkthrough of how Arrows could fit. But otherwise, if you have questions, we're going to hang out here for another 10-15 minutes probably, as many questions as we get here, and we're going to sort of talk about onboarding a little more. So drop your questions in the chat. If you don't have questions, if you're watching this recorded, we will be sending all of the we'll be sending the recording, all the slides that we had here in the deck as well. But we'd love to hear questions, and thanks so much for being here. Thanks so much to Luke, Sherelle. We stayed pretty on time through all the presentation. But any questions, drop them in the chat for them, and we'll get into them. Luke, do you have what's the, I guess, question for you? Because I'm curious. We haven't chatted a ton before this. What is the thing that you were most surprised by, sort of when you saw data about your onboarding process? Sort of what was the difference between sort of expectation and reality or assumption and reality, I guess, when you saw the data?
Yeah, it was like where my customers get stuck and lose momentum, right? I thought that was further down along the plan, where in reality they were getting stuck right from the beginning. So you have like kind of like this gut instinct, or you think where your customers are starting to lose momentum and getting stuck, and come to find out I was I was wrong about that 100%. And so yeah, that was the most eye-opening thing for sure.
We got a question for you, Luke, in the chat. How were you managing onboarding before you started using Arrows or found Arrows?
Oh, wow. With Google Docs, that's where it first started, was Google Docs. And it was mostly, it wasn't collaborative at all, right? It wasn't a shared document at the beginning. It was just something for us to track progress through internally. And then it kind of came collaborative, and then that just got really messy. And so it wasn't very easy to update stuff, and wasn't really there to keep customers on track and track progress and keep them motivated and momentum going. It was most of like, just do this and do this and do this, right? And so And then that kind of rolled over into a Google Sheet, of course, which, had check marks and tasks and phases that they could actually complete. Had a progress bar on there, but it still wasn't exactly what I was really looking for when I was thinking about the onboarding experience from the customer's perspective. It still was kind of sloppy. It wasn't something that we could really drive a clear path through. So, and so then I came upon Arrows, and that's where we're at today. So.
Nice. I think that's a pretty common, common response or common starting point, right? To document the sort of static version that's internal only, and then moving to an external version is sort of step 2. Okay, another one here. Maybe Luke Sherrill, you want to sort of tag team this one? It could go either way.
Yeah, Luke, maybe you go first since you actually split it into 3 templates. Then I can.
Right. So from a scaling perspective, 3 templates, that was just a lot to manage, right? Because you'd have to update each 3 individually, right? And so if we decided to move a phase or add some tasks to a phase, previously that was done manually for each one of those templates. And so that was just too much to manage, right? We want to focus on our customers. And so being able through dynamic branching to be able to combine all of these phases together and have those into one template and have those phases shown based on the HubSpot data was a solid step in the right direction there for sure.
Yeah, one thing I'd add to that too is sometimes it just might depend on your bandwidth. Like if you are a smaller team and you can't fully support out all the different tiers you want, I like starting with one-to-one human-led onboarding for any segment until I learn enough to then go quickly figure out how can I make it as self-serve or as self-guided as possible. And so part of it's also just depending on what resources you have, what budget you have, what kind of physical humans you have on your CSM support team. Do you have dedicated onboarding CSMs, or is it a joint function between your account managers or CSMs beyond point of sales? So those pieces go into it. For me, it's also part of how you're selling the product. So if you have different tiers of features and integrations available in your product or in your service, those can be the more clear lines. So if you have a price, a lot of, especially SaaS and tech companies have pricing pages with 2 or 3 different buckets. Start there. They're already categorized for you. Build plans for those. What you'll notice over time is odds are it's the same steps over and over and over again. It's just what avenue or fashion you're delivering them to customers in. And part of that also is over time your product being designed better and built better and more intuitive to allow you to reduce the number of things you have to tell someone to do. And those things just become a little bit more obvious in the product or app itself. So in my case, how I've split those lines is starting with the pricing tiers. Here's the 3 kind of onboardings we offer based on the 3 packages you can buy, and then going into those and trying to make the ones where I don't have as much time or bigger volumes coming into those buckets, trying to work on those, make them a little bit self-serve and so on.
Totally. We have one that's a little higher level here from Matthew, but I think this is a really critical one, especially for teams going into next year, thinking about forecasting, thinking about planning. What are the things that you're using and sort of reporting to that either just as sort of a visibility to other teams, but also that you're going to sort of be able to leverage when you're making asks or thinking about how you get leverage for your team.
Yeah, I can share my thoughts, and then maybe Luke, you can share your thoughts on what your executive team wanted to see. I think there's a couple things. I try to make it as, there's 2 things. One, always ask your executive team, what is it they care about? What numbers what are your goals this month, this quarter, this year? What are the bigger business initiatives? And oftentimes it's reducing customer churn, increasing customer revenue, right? Like at the most highest levels, that's what people are trying to solve for. So can you cater your goals to do that? So if you have a churn problem, an early life cycle churn problem in months 1, 2, and 3 of your life cycle, ideally what you're doing in onboarding is reducing that churn in those early life cycle moments. So can you show that, all right, we used to have 20% of our customers canceling after using the product for 30 days. Now we have 15% canceling. And we think it's because that additional 5% actually completed their onboarding plans. And now you can prove that that is true or not. But it needs to be aligned to the bigger business metrics and the bigger business goals. So start by asking, obviously listen to all hands at your business, listen to the KPIs and everything that's being shared at the highest levels, and figure out how you can have your process and steps at least work towards impacting that. Because the real advantage of that is that's when you start to unlock budget. That's when you start to get things like the ability to buy more tools, to add bigger teams, to segment teams, to have prioritized focuses on things like onboarding and account management and customer success. So the more tied to the bigger business initiatives, I think the more likely you are to see that value. If you're looking for just like more generic starting points, time and onboarding is the most common place people want to understand. It's used to take this many days. We're trying to get it to this many days. What are the things we can change in there to actually make that happen?
Yeah, totally. Luke, any thoughts on how you think about that at Blaze?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and to Sherrell's point, reducing churn and reducing the time to actualize that revenue that came into the onboarding pipeline, right? And so if we can work on reducing the average days it takes for a customer to launch, we can actualize that revenue faster. And through the experience that they're having, with the plan, we've gotten amazing feedback from our customers using the plan coming through onboarding, and so that's creating a lifelong customer right there from the start, right? They're having a great experience. All of this is laid out. We have videos, we have support articles, there's forms that we can use too within the plan. So we can kind of come at the customer from all different angles. People learn differently. And so our plan is multifaceted in that way, that there's videos, there's support articles. So if you like to watch a video or if you want to read something, either way, you're going to get the information you need to complete that task and have that learning experience. And then when we have those review calls, it just becomes more of a strategy session than it is me just saying like, this button does this and this button does that, which right. People fall asleep and it's just boring, right? And so we're creating lifelong customers from the get with the experience that they're having in onboarding. And yeah, that prevents that early life cycle churn for sure and keeps those customers coming back year after year, because Blaze is an amazing product. And once they get through onboarding and they start selling lead with Blaze, they'll realize that, and we'll hit those aha moments along the way. So, and that revenue becomes actualized faster and we cut down on churn. So it's a win-win for sure.
I love that you touched on the customer experience too, because that's such a big component of, because often, especially in marketing and sales, we do treat prospects really, really, really well, right? And so how do you continue that experience into the next phase of their journey? And that is also actually measurable. Like it can be as simple as a NPS type survey at the end of an onboarding process where you just ask, did this meet your expectations? Were you able to achieve your goals? Yes or no? Like it can be that basic of data, but now you can go to your exec and board teams and say, 95% of our customers are actually pleased with this experience. And then determine like that, if it's 5% that isn't pleased, do we care to solve that? Is that enough value to go solve today? Do we have the bandwidth to solve for that today? Or do we at least know it's a problem and we will fix it? We just don't have the moment to do it right now. That's where data is also very powerful, because you can actually then say, we know these are existing problems. We know they are important. We are also tackling other things this moment instead of sitting and basically doing nothing.
Yeah, totally. Absolutely. Yeah, we have a quick little check, like midway through the onboarding process. We have a quick little form that we created within the Arrows plan that, asks them for feedback. And, a lot of times we get all 5s, so that's great. And then we have a little bit bigger CSAT survey at the end to gauge the overall experience.
Right.
And yeah, and we can report that back to leadership, and they can see like, hey, like, the not only are we getting customers through in a timely manner, but they're having an awesome experience at the same time. So leverage that data and send that up the flagpole for sure.
Yeah, make yourself look good.
To hang our hats on.
I think that's a great place to leave it. Well, thank you everybody so much for joining. Thank you to Luke again. Thank you to Sherelle for being here. Again, if you want to learn more about Arrows, arrows.to/demo. We also have the Vault, which is templates, tips, playbooks for all things customer onboarding, success, and HubSpot, and sort of the intersection of those two things. We will, of course, send out the recording, this deck as well. But thank you, everybody, for being here. Thank you to Luke and Sherelle, and enjoy the rest of your Tuesday.
Happy onboarding.
Thank you.
Bye.